The Miami Dolphins made moves on Thursday with Jaylen Waddle's contract extension. Is Tyreek Hill next? At least one prominent media outlet seems to think so. We'll explore why here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Full disclosure. I'm re-recording the intro to this podcast because I did this show this morning at 10 o'clock. And then Jaylen Waddle got extended. So you won't hear any other acknowledgments of Jaylen Waddle's contract from this point onward. But this conversation, it's too good. There's been a second correspondence. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk had a report come out this morning speculating and reading in between the lines on a quote from Tyreek Hill that he may be looking to have his contract adjusted based on his cash flow. He's got 3 years left on it. We'll get into all of that. I finished the show, and 10 minutes later, as I'm producing it, Jaylen Waddle contract extension drops. And then, in the immediate aftermath and going live on YouTube and reacting to the Jaylen Waddle contract extension, Mike Florio drops an update on Pro Football Talk. And according to him, according to a source with close to the situation, who's familiar with the situation, Tyreek Hill has reportedly, according to Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, been trying to work on a new contract or a contract adjustment or however you want to classify it since the end of the season. So with that in mind, we got that out of the way. There's my disclaimer. There's a lot of good content coming your way. Just don't expect to hear anything else about Jaylen Waddle's contract extension because this, from here on, was recorded before that became a reality. And we are obviously now living in with the Dolphins locking in, at least for the next 3 seasons, this pair of superstar wide receivers to play potentially alongside one another. But some of that depends on what the Dolphins' long-term outlook is with Tyreek Hill. We'll talk about that here today. Here we go. Tyreek Hill has been a superstar through his first 2 years in Miami. And this past year in 2023 was technically the first year of his 4-year, $120 million contract extension that he signed with the team when he was traded to the Dolphins, entering into a contract year back in 2022. So last year of old deal, first year of new deal. He's under contract for 2024, 2025, 2026. The Dolphins, interestingly enough, have not done anything with his contract this offseason in spite of being very busy on just about every front as it pertains to salary cap management and contract structuring and strategizing their long-term health of their salary cap. They have not touched Tyreek Hill, which I have felt has been interesting. And now one prominent outlet, Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, NBC Sports, seems to think that Tyreek Hill could be in line for addressing or rediscussing the terms of his contract. And I know not everybody loves Mike Florio in Miami Dolphins land, right? And he does the show with Chris Sims, and there's been some criticism of the Dolphins organization going from the tampering to Tua Tagovailoa, and sometimes that criticism got a little weird. I'll say this. I don't necessarily always agree with the football analysis takes, but from the business of football side of things, I really do enjoy Mike's perspective on things. I think it's maybe the lawyer in him. Now, does it get a little galaxy brain sometimes? Yeah. Is this maybe one of those incidences? Yeah. But kind of the crux of the argument, and I do think, this gets a little bit more credence for me because They haven't done anything with Tyreek's contract, right? The crux of his argument is that when Tyreek Hill signed the contract 2 years ago for the 4-year, $130 million or $120 million extension for $30 million a season, and put $45 million of non-guaranteed money on the back end of the contract in the final year. So they backloaded it with not guaranteed money to juice the annual average to make him the first $30 million wide receiver in NFL history. And since the wide receiver market has grown and evolved and leveled up, and now you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who pushed past him without the fake year on the back, or the inflated year on the back end. And A.J. Brown got a $32 million per year contract extension from Philadelphia. And then you have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, and these guys are all in line for new contracts. And if they all get him this offseason, Tyreek might get dropped even further down in the pecking order for a guy who's had 1,700 yards in consecutive seasons and been on the field, everything you could have asked for when you traded for him. That's the point of Mike Florio's argument, in addition to a quote that he had just a couple weeks ago pertaining to his career in Miami. And here's the full quote and what Mike Florio latched onto. And I think there is some legitimacy, perhaps, to reading between the lines on what Tyreek Hill said. I love the team I play on. I love the guys in the locker room. I love the head coach. I love the GM. So that means sign me. I love you, all you guys so much. I want to stay in Miami forever. Keep me there. And the point that Florio makes, and it's a legitimate point, Tyreek Hill's got 3 more years on his contract. And 3 years in contract world it's almost the length of a rookie contract. It's a significant amount of time. The NFL season goes by in the blink of an eye. The NFL offseason at times goes by in the blink of an eye, except for June and the first 2 weeks of July and the last 2 weeks before the draft, right? Those are really the only times it feels like it kind of slogs along. So to say, sign me, well, you have 3 years on your contract. That's Mike Florio's point. And if you're reading between the lines, and if Tyreek Hill does indeed kind of want his contract looked at, he has a legitimate argument on 2 separate fronts. That's guaranteed cash remaining and cash owed for 2024. And what we're going to do next here on Locked On Dolphins, I actually have the publicly disclosed terms of the contract. I don't have the actual contract because I don't got those kind of strings to pull. But I have the publicly disclosed details of the contract, courtesy of overthecap.com and spotrac.com. Where Tyreek's contract stands, what it was the first 2 years he was in Miami, what money is left on it, what money is guaranteed, what the cash distribution looks like. We're going to compare and contrast that to cash flow and cash due to other wide receivers across the league for each of the 3 years he has remaining left on his contract. And then we're going to go through what kinds of options the Dolphins have with Tyreek Hill, if this is indeed something that he and his camp are interested in having the discussion on. That's next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Going to the game is not supposed to be stressful. You love your sports, you love your concerts, you love your comedy, your theater, you name it. Live entertainment is a nice break from reality. But getting locked up in shopping for tickets and the planning, sometimes it's better to just be spontaneous. And if you're one of those people, Gametime has got you covered. You could save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals and zone deals to make sure that you are getting exclusive in-app prices to help you save even more money. And with their all-in pricing, you can see the total value for buying your tickets. There's no surprises when you put the tickets into your cart and go to checkout. You get a panoramic view to see what your sight lines are from your seat. And with the Gametime ticket lowest price guarantee, they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets in the same row and section for less. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today for last-minute tickets with the lowest prices guaranteed. So if you're watching on YouTube, I have the visual aid. We're going to pull it up. If you're not watching on YouTube, rest easy. We're going to talk through it. But let's look at this Tyreek Hill contract and what is left on this contract. Tyreek restructured his contract in 2023 ahead of the season. So his base salary for each of 2022 and 2023 was the minimum that you could pay a salary with his respective tenure. He had a $25.5 million signing bonus when he signed the contract in 2022. So they took 25.5 and they spread it out across 5 seasons because that's what you can do with signing bonuses. So it's $5.1 million for 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026, aka the entire life of the contract. And if you're watching on YouTube, you could see right here, the sum is $25.5 million. Now he was owed about 26 and change in cash in 2023 after getting 26 or so in 2022. It was the 25.5 plus a $1.035 million base salary. So it was just over $26 million. Just right around $26 million again in 2023. They restructured him. They didn't use any void years on the back end of this. So they took $24,835,000 and they divided it by 4 for the remaining years left on the contract. And they left him with a $1.165 million base salary. They took 6.208705 this year, or 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026 against the cap. So each of the last 2 years, the vast majority of his compensation has come in the form of lump sum bonuses that have been prorated out across each of the remaining years on his contract. As a result, he carried a $6.5 million salary cap hit in 2022, and he carried just under a $13 million salary cap commitment in 2023. 2024, Tyreek is currently owed $19.665 million in base salary. It is fully guaranteed. It guaranteed last offseason. Just realized you guys on YouTube, you can't see me. Hello. That $19.665 million is the last guaranteed money on Tyreek Hill's contract. So from Tyreek Hill's perspective, if he wants to have the argument about addressing his contract, his second best argument is, I have no guaranteed money left after this year on the deal, right? This year's base salary is the last guarantees that I have, and I'm getting into my early 30s, and I'm a hyper-productive player. I've been everything on the field that you would want, and I've got no guarantees left on my deal. You guys can walk at any given point, and I get no more money. Now, he doesn't care about the salary cap proration. There's a separate conversation there, because if Miami were to hypothetically trade Tyreek Hill, they would owe 3 years of the 5.1 per year signing bonus and 3 years of the 4-year 6.208 restructure bonus from last year. They would still owe all of that money that would all get accelerated, although I guess technically it would be a post-June 1st trade. So they would carry a $11.3 million dead cap hit this year, and then a dead cap hit of $22.6 million next year. But you don't really want to trade Tyreek Hill, right? Like you're trying to win. You want to play with Tyreek Hill, so you assume he's going to be here this year. But he doesn't care about any of those details anyway. From the player perspective, all I care about is cash flow. How you do the bookkeeping is on you guys to do the bookkeeping. The other point of argument that Tyreek Hill has as it pertains to his contract is cash owed to other receivers across the league. Tyreek Hill is currently owed the 14th most money amongst NFL wide receivers this year. Here are the wide receivers that are owed more cash and how much more cash they are owed than Tyreek's $19.765 when you include a $100,000 workout bonus that he's due this summer. Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, and Amari Cooper are all owed $20 million apiece, respectfully. A.J. Brown, after signing his new contract extension, and that averages 32 per season, but he was already playing on a $25 million a year contract before he got the extension. A.J. Brown owed $21.25 million. He's in 10th place by himself. And again, Tyreek at 14th with $19.765 million. Devonta Smith signed his contract extension. He got a 3-year extension. With the signing bonus, the cash that he's receiving is $21.4 million. T. Higgins on the franchise tag is getting $21.8 million. He's in 8th place. Deebo Samuel, $21.9 million. Mike Evans is getting 23. This is cash, not cap hits. This is cash. Keenan Allen going to Chicago after being traded this offseason. $23.1 million in cash. Marvin Harrison Jr., the number 4 overall pick in the draft. He gets a 20, was it 4? Was it 6? It was early. It was 4. $23.34 million in cash with a contract in that stratosphere. That signing bonus is lofty. Calvin Ridley, $25 million. He's in 3rd place. Michael Pittman, with his new contract, he was on the franchise tag and signed an extension, $28 million. And then Stephon Diggs is getting $29.765 million in cash after getting traded from Buffalo to Houston. Houston reworked that entire contract and lopped the years off the end of it. So from Stephon Diggs' perspective, you say, oh, you want me to come play on a young contender for effectively $30 million in cash on a 1-year deal? Great. I'll do that, and then I'll look to cash in on my next contract. But Stephon Diggs is getting $10 million more in cash than Tyreek Hill this year. So from Tyreek Hill's perspective, if you want to have an argument about addressing a contract, that's where the conversation lies. Be like, look, y'all, this is the last guaranteed money I have. You can walk out of this after this year at any given point with no questions asked. And I'm underpaid in cash relative to my peers. And he'd be correct in saying that. And if I were the Dolphins, I'd look at the options that I have, and I think there's some things that you can do, including telling Tyreek to kick rocks. You're under contract this year. We have 3 years remaining on the deal. But the issue that I think, from my perspective, if I'm trying to look at the pathways the Dolphins can take, they already set a precedent of doing something like this with Xavier Howard. And they did it more than once, where he signed a contract. He decided he didn't like the contract. There was a bunch of years left on the contract. The Dolphins played ball with Xavier Howard and reworked that contract on more than one occasion. And what ultimately ended up happening is then you move on from Xavier Howard, and we're getting ready to cash in about 36 hours. We're going to reap the benefits of moving on from Xavier Howard. Finally, you're going to get $18.5 million in cash, right? Or in salary cap, right? But that deal became uglier as Xavier reached kind of the wall that he kind of felt like he hit to a certain degree at the end of his time in Miami. And doing that with that many years left on a contract is kind of where you're in a little bit of a rock and a hard place. So what options do the Dolphins have? That's what we're looking at next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. As I mentioned, the Dolphins could just tell Tyreek, tough cookie. We're going to roll with this year on your contract as is. And I can't imagine Tyreek Hill would hold out beyond training camp if he did decide to hold out. And again, this is all speculative and proactive conversation. If Tyreek Hill wants to have these conversations with the team, I don't know that he is. I'm simply following through on what Mike Florio posted this morning on Pro Football Talk as kind of a speculative reading between the lines. And I openly acknowledge Mike at times can get a little galaxy brain. But the quote that Tyreek had and the way that it was phrased and looking at his contract, I think you can see where there may be a desire to readdress that contract. And then again, the Dolphins haven't done anything with it. They didn't restructure it and say, okay, yeah, we're going to get ourselves another $12 million in cap space by restructuring Tyreek, or it could have even been bigger than that if they were willing to put a void year on the back end of it. And they did that with just about everybody this offseason. So there's enough there that it's like, yeah, well, what if they do want to have the conversation? And here's the options that the Dolphins have. If they do want to play ball and Tyreek is committed to getting something discussed and disclosed. The Dolphins could say, too bad, we're going to let you be as is. The Dolphins can also rip up the rest of the contract, use kind of the foundation of the new wide receiver market to work on a new contract from this point forward, which maybe adds another year in 2027, and then it's like a new 4-year deal. And he's only adding 1 year on the back end of it where we'd play in 2027, but then there's obviously a renewed cash flow. But the challenge with that is off of the original signing bonus, Tyreek still has $15.3 million of it that's been prorated out that you still have to account. He got a restructure bonus, and that is over $18.5 million from the 2023 lump sum that's prorated out through 2026. So even if you tore the rest of the contract up and said everything moving forward, we're going to rework the compensation, you're still looking at in 2024, 2025, and 2026, each of those 3 seasons, you have $11.308 million in non-negotiable salary cap dues that you're going to have. So whatever new contract you have, you're going to stack $11.3 million on top of it anyway. And then you're into the intersection of Tyreek and his age, and then you're into the intersection of Tyreek and some of the headlines off the field that are not the kinds of things that you want to be dealing with as a franchise. And I don't know. I don't know that I would, with 3 years left on this deal, tear the whole thing up and start it from scratch either. Here's what I think you can do. Mike Florio made the point in his story that there was this Fugazi final year, right? $43.9 million in base salary that's owed. None of it guaranteed in 2026. That is for those of you watching on YouTube. We're talking about this year right here. He has another $1 million roster bonus if he's on the roster that year. And then he has a $100,000 workout bonus that he is owed, as he has every offseason. He has a $100,000 workout bonus. In total, that is $45 million in cash. What if you take some inspiration from what Tyreek's old teammate in Kansas City, Pat Mahomes, had done with his contract last offseason? We're not going to address the years. We're not going to change the duration of the contract. But what if we redistribute some of the money? Right? What if we take some money from the end of the contract and bring it to the current year of the contract to give you some more competitive salary in the here and now? And then after that, it kind of becomes a pay-as-you-play type of contract for the final 2 years. Or you could see how this year goes, and then with no guaranteed money left on the contract, then you can kind of get into the weeds of reassessing the contract. If Tyreek Hill and his camp wants to have the conversation about readdressing his contract, and the Dolphins are willing to play ball, and they want to do right by the player, which they have set the precedent of doing with Xavier Howard by working with contracts that have several years left on the deal. Don't do what the Bills did. The Bills did Stephon Diggs' contract extension with 2 years left on it. And by the time he was ready to play the first year of the new deal, he was traded off the team. That's what happened with Stephon Diggs. So doing new extensions with this much time left gets messy. But it's a lot easier to say, okay, Tyreek, let's make the numbers round so it's easy. Okay, let's lump your workout bonus into your base salary. And let's take your roster bonus and put it into your base salary as well, just to make it clean numbers for us to have the conversation. You're owed $45 million in cash in 2026. What if we took, say, $6 million of it. And we removed that $6 million from 2026. And we just moved it into money that we paid you now. And now your cash received, you could add it to his base salary as an increase in just a pure pay raise from the week by week checks that he gets. And if you did that, his salary cap hit would go from $31.3 million to, again, say you're taking just $6 million to $37.3 million because you reallocated money from 2026. That's not guaranteed money. You put it into this year. You made it guaranteed. That's a compromise. If the Dolphins don't like that distribution, they could also say, we're going to give you a $6 million bonus that we will prorate out across each of the final 3 years of your contract. So instead of your salary cap hit going up by $6 million, it goes up by $2 million. And then we are just adding 4 years or $4 million of additional prorated money to the future years of your contract that either will be absorbed into when we rework your contract with an extension later down the road, or will be absorbed as dead cap hit starting in 2025. And if the Dolphins were to move on from Tyreek Hill in 2025, his prorated money at that stage, even after moving $6 million of non-guaranteed money into guaranteed money that's paid in 2024, you're looking at a $26.5 million dead cap hit, but he's owed over almost $35 million against the cap in 2025 before you did this reworking of his contract. So that's a very long-winded way of saying if Mike Florio's onto something and Tyreek Hill wants his contract looked at and his compensation, and he doesn't feel like it's necessarily in line with what he wants from a pay perspective. The Dolphins' argument is, let's take some money from 2026, move it forward. If they did, just hypothetically, it's an arbitrational number I pulled out of my rear end. I want to be abundantly clear about that. But if you took $6 million and now he's paid $25.7 million instead of $19.7 million, he now ranks third in the NFL in cash owed this year, behind Michael Pittman, who got a big signing bonus, and Stephon Diggs, who's on a one-year deal to try to cash out and go to his next team. And even if he did that, he'd rank third in cash owed this year. In 2025, with the cash that he's currently owed at $22.9 million, that ranks fourth in the NFL right now. Now, there's other wide receiver contract extensions like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb that potentially end up lapping that. There's other wide receiver contracts on the open market that maybe they get an abundant signing bonus and push up over top of that number. But as things currently stand, Tyreek's $22.9 million ranks fourth in the NFL in cash owed, behind Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, and Calvin Ridley. Okay, that's pretty good company to be amongst. And then in 2026, as things currently stand, even after you take the $6 million out of the cash that he's owed and you move it to 2024, the new money of cash owed of $39 million is still by almost $3 million the number one figure in the league. Now, it's not guaranteed money, and that, of course, is nowhere near as attractive. But if something has to be done with this deal, I think the most middle ground approach to take is to leave the terms of the contract the way that they are and simply redistribute some of the cash from the end of the contract and bring it into the here and the now. And depending on what your plans are for your post-June 1st money, you can absorb that all up front, and all you've done is give him a pay raise for 2024 and not impacted your salary cap exit strategies at all. Or from a very minimal degree, Well, depending on when you would move on, if you needed to take an exit ramp, whether that's in 2025 or 2026, you're adding a couple $1 million. That's Tyreek Hill's contract situation, where it stands, what options the Dolphins have, the wide receiver market, and it still remains a mystery to me that they didn't touch it at all, which makes me think perhaps something at some point is coming down the chute. We'll find out, though. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Fins up. Make it a great rest of your day. I'll be back again tomorrow.